Daniel Reed pressed his face against the transport window and watched the massive structure grow larger. Galactic Academy Station Helix 7 looked like a spinning wheel made of metal and glass, floating in the darkness of space. His stomach twisted with nerves. 3 months of language training and cultural classes hadn't prepared him for this moment. The transport docked with a soft thud. Daniel grabbed his single bag and followed the other passengers into the arrival bay. They were all aliens. Tall ones, short ones, some with scales and others with fur. A few had extra arms. One looked like a floating jellyfish inside a water tank on wheels. None of them looked at him. They all moved away when he got too close. A gray-skinned alien with a ridge running down his head waited at the gate. His yellow eyes studied Daniel with obvious doubt. "You are the human," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. Daniel Reed from Earth. I am Warden Tulos. Follow me." The alien turned and walked away without waiting. Daniel hurried after him through corridors filled with strange students. Some whispered when they saw him. Others simply stared. A group of furry aliens actually crossed to the other side of the hallway to avoid passing near him. Daniel felt his face get hot. He was used to being the new kid, but this was different. Here, he was the new species. "Your quarters are in Section 7, Tulos said without looking back. "Classes begin tomorrow. You will attend standard curriculum with other first-year students. Try not to cause problems." "I won't cause any problems, sir." Tulos stopped and turned around. His yellow eyes narrowed. "Your planet is classified as a death world. Your species evolved as persistence hunters. You come from a place where almost everything is poison or predator. The other students fear you, and they have good reason. Stay out of trouble." Daniel wanted to argue but kept quiet. He had heard this speech before in different words. Humans were dangerous. Humans were scary. Humans came from a planet that would kill most other species in days. It didn't matter that Daniel had never hurt anyone in his life. It didn't matter that he liked animals and helped his little sister with homework. He was human, so he was a threat. His room was small but clean. 1 bed, 1 desk, 1 window looking out at the stars. Daniel dropped his bag and sat on the bed. The mattress was too hard and smelled strange. He pulled out his phone and looked at the last picture his family sent. His mom, dad, and little sister Amy all smiling at the camera. Amy had written, "Come back soon," on a piece of paper she held up. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. The next morning, Daniel found his first class after getting lost twice. The other students were already sitting down when he entered. Every head turned to look at him. The room went silent. Daniel saw an empty seat in the back and walked toward it. The alien student sitting next to it immediately grabbed her bag and moved to a different desk. Professor Halvek was a tall being with 4 arms and skin that changed colors. He taught xenobiology, the study of alien life forms. Daniel tried to focus on the lesson, but he kept noticing how the other students glanced at him nervously. During group work, nobody wanted to be his partner. He ended up working alone. Lunch was worse. The cafeteria was huge and loud, filled with hundreds of students from dozens of worlds. Daniel got his food from a machine that asked what kind of biology he had, and then produced something that looked almost like a sandwich. He stood with his tray looking for somewhere to sit. Every table he approached suddenly became full. Students turned their backs or pretended not to see him. He finally sat alone at a table in the corner. The food tasted like cardboard, but he ate it anyway. A female alien with orange fur and large eyes sat down 3 tables away. She kept glancing at him while talking to her friends. Daniel heard the word human several times. They were definitely talking about him. After lunch, Daniel had time before his next class. He decided to explore the station. Most areas were off-limits to first-year students, but the observation decks were open. He took a lift to level 12 and walked out onto a platform with a clear dome overhead. Space stretched out in every direction, filled with stars and distant nebulas. For a moment, Daniel forgot about being lonely. Beautiful, isn't it? Daniel turned around. The orange-furred alien from the cafeteria stood a few feet away. Up close, he could see she had white stripes on her arms and her eyes were bright green. "Yeah," Daniel said carefully. "It is. I am Nira," she said. "I should apologize. At lunch, I was talking about you with my friends. It was rude. It's okay. Everyone's been doing it all day." Nira's ears flattened against her head. "We have heard stories about humans. About your world. They say your planet has storms that can level cities and animals that hunt in packs. They say humans can run for hours without stopping and track prey across continents. I can barely run a mile, Daniel said with a weak smile. And the most dangerous thing I ever tracked was my cat when she got out of the house. Neera tilted her head. What is a cat? It's a small furry animal. We keep them as pets, companions. You keep predators in your home? Neera's eyes went wide. Well, they're not really dangerous. They're soft and they purr when you pet them. Neera looked confused. Your species domesticated a hunter and keeps it for emotional comfort? Daniel hadn't thought about it that way. I guess so, yeah. That is very strange, Neera said slowly. But maybe not in a bad way. She was quiet for a moment. I have class now. Perhaps I will see you again, Daniel from Earth. She left before he could respond. Daniel watched her go, feeling slightly less alone than before. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was something. A start. That evening, Daniel attended his last class of the day. Professor Halvek was lecturing about the station's research facilities. In the lower levels, we maintain containment areas for various species, he explained. Some are dangerous, collected for study. Ravenclaws from Thornwald, crystal serpents from the Andor system, shadow hunters from the Dark Moons. These creatures help us understand predator behavior across the galaxy. Daniel felt uncomfortable. Keeping animals locked up for study didn't seem right, but he kept his opinion to himself. He was already enough of an outsider. After class, he returned to his small room and called home. His mom answered with a huge smile. How was your first day, honey? It was okay, Daniel lied. Just getting used to everything. They talked for 20 minutes about nothing important. When the call ended, Daniel felt even more homesick. He lay on his too-hard bed and stared at the ceiling. 3 years. He had 3 years at this academy before he could go home. 3 years of being the scary human that everyone avoided. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, unaware that everything was about to change. 2 weeks had passed since Daniel arrived at the academy. Life had settled into a lonely routine. Classes, meals alone, studying in his room. Neera sometimes nodded at him in the hallways, but they hadn't spoken again. Daniel told himself he was fine with it, even though he wasn't. Today felt different from the moment he woke up. Something in the air seemed wrong. Daniel got dressed and headed to his morning xenobiology class. The corridors were more crowded than usual, with students clustered in small groups talking in worried voices. Did you hear about the maintenance issues? They say the containment systems have been glitching. My brother works in security. He says it's worse than they're admitting. Daniel slipped past them and entered the classroom. Professor Halvek looked tired. His skin kept shifting between gray and pale blue, which Daniel had learned meant stress. Today we will discuss the Ravenclaw species, Halvek began, native to the forest world of Thornwald. They are apex predators with no natural enemies. 8 limbs, 4 for movement and 4 for grasping. Highly intelligent pack hunters. Adult females can weigh up to 400 pounds. They have never been successfully domesticated or trained. A hologram appeared above Halvek's desk, showing a creature that made Daniel's breath catch. It looked like a cross between a wolf and a panther, but with extra legs and a longer body. Its fur was dark with silver markings. The eyes were too intelligent, too aware. Even in hologram form, it looked deadly. We have 3 specimens in the research levels, Halvek continued. An adult female and her 2 cubs. They were acquired 6 months ago for behavioral study. A student with blue skin raised one of her 3 hands. Isn't it dangerous to keep them here? The containment systems are advanced, Halvek said, but his skin flickered darker. Multiple redundancies ensure safety. Daniel thought about those creatures locked in cages below. The mother separated from her cubs, or maybe all 3 trapped together in a too small space. It made him angry in a way he couldn't quite explain. The class ended and students filed out. Daniel was gathering his things when the lights flickered. Once, twice, then steady again. A low hum filled the air, different from the normal station sounds. Attention all personnel. The announcement came from speakers in the ceiling. Security Chief Vorn's voice was calm but firm. We are experiencing technical difficulties in the research sector. All students proceed to your dormitories and remain there until further notice. This is not a drill. The hallway erupted in chaos. Students pushed and shoved, trying to get to the lifts. Daniel got caught in the crowd, swept along with them. The lights flickered again, and this time they went red. Emergency lighting. Containment breach in Sector 9. Vorn's voice had changed, sharp with urgency now. All security teams respond. Students find the nearest safe room immediately. Do not, I repeat, do not attempt to reach your dormitories. The crowd panicked. Aliens scattered in every direction, screaming in languages Daniel didn't understand. He saw Nira being pushed against a wall by larger students. Without thinking, he pushed through and pulled her away from the crush. This way, he shouted over the noise. They ran together down a side corridor, away from the worst of the crowd. Behind them, Daniel heard something that made his blood go cold. A roar, deep and primal, echoing through the ventilation system. Then crashing sounds, metal tearing. What was that? Nira's voice shook. I think something got out. They turned a corner and nearly ran into Professor Halvek. His skin was pure white with fear. The Ravenclaws, he gasped. The female broke out. She killed 2 guards. Get to safety now. More roars echoed through the station, but these were different. Higher pitched, younger. The Cubs, Daniel said. Forget the Cubs, Halvek snapped. Save yourselves. He ran past them, his forearms pumping. Nira grabbed Daniel's sleeve. We need to hide. You go, Daniel said. I'm going to check something. Are you insane? There's a 400-pound predator loose. The Cubs sounded scared. What if they got left behind in the evacuation? Nira stared at him. They are dangerous animals. They're babies. Scared babies. Daniel pulled away from her grip. Go find a safe room. I'll be fine. He ran before she could argue, heading deeper into the station instead of towards safety. The red emergency lights made everything look like a nightmare. Daniel passed abandoned equipment and open doorways. Once he heard heavy footsteps above him in the ceiling crawl spaces. Something big was moving up there. The research sector was a disaster. Doors hung open, sparking wires dangling from ceiling panels. Daniel saw claw marks gouged into the metal walls. He followed the sounds of whimpering to a laboratory with Xenobiology Research 7 printed on the door. Inside, the room was a mess. Overturned tables, shattered glass, papers everywhere. And in the corner, huddled behind an overturned cabinet, were 2 small shapes. The Ravenclaw cubs were much smaller than their mother, maybe 30 pounds each. Their dark fur was matted with something Daniel hoped wasn't blood. One had a cut on its leg. They made sounds that were almost like crying as they pressed against each other. When they saw Daniel, they bared their teeth and hissed. 4 eyes, too many teeth, claws that looked very sharp. But Daniel saw past that. He saw terrified children who had been left behind. It's okay, he said softly, crouching down to make himself smaller. I'm not going to hurt you. The cubs didn't believe him. They hissed louder, trying to make themselves look bigger. Daniel sat down on the floor several feet away from them. He moved slowly, keeping his hands visible. His dad had taught him this when dealing with scared animals on their farm. You're hurt, he said to the one with the cut leg. That looks like it stings. Time passed. Daniel didn't move closer, didn't make sudden gestures. He just sat and talked quietly about nothing important. About his sister Amy and her collection of stuffed animals. About his dog back home named Copper. About missing his mom's cooking. Eventually, the cubs stopped hissing. Their ears, which had been flat against their heads, slowly rose. The uninjured one took a tentative step forward. Daniel stayed still. Another step. Then another. The cub sniffed at his hand. Its nose was cold and wet, just like a dog's. After a moment, it didn't pull away. There we go, Daniel whispered. See, I'm not scary. The other cub, the injured one, made a soft sound. Not a hiss this time, but something else, almost questioning. Yeah, I see you too, Daniel said. Let me look at that leg, okay? He spent the next few minutes gaining their trust, moving inch by inch closer, letting them smell him, touch him with their strange paws. Finally, he was able to examine the injured cub's leg. The cut wasn't deep, but it needed cleaning. Daniel found a first aid kit on the wall. The instructions were in 3 languages, but the pictures were clear enough. He cleaned the wound while the cub squirmed. Its sibling watched closely, growling protectively. I know, Daniel murmured, but infection is worse than a little sting. When he finished, both cubs seemed calmer. Daniel found emergency rations in a cabinet and offered them some. They ate hungrily, making satisfied sounds between bites. Somewhere in the distance, metal shrieked. The mother was still hunting through the station. Still searching. She's looking for you, Daniel realized. You're what she wants. The cubs pressed against him, one on each side. They were warm and solid, and they smelled like wet fur and something spicy he couldn't identify. Daniel put his arms around them carefully, ready to pull back if they objected. They didn't. Instead, they settled closer, What am I doing? Daniel asked himself. He was sitting in an abandoned lab, hugging two alien predator cubs while their mother tore through the station. This was insane, but he couldn't leave them. Wouldn't leave them. We need to find somewhere safer, he told the cubs. Can you walk? The injured one limped but could move. Daniel led them deeper into the research sector, away from the main corridors. He found a small storage room with a door that's still locked. Inside were supplies, shelves of equipment, and enough space for the three of them. Daniel secured the door and made a nest of lab coats and emergency blankets in the corner. The cubs curled up immediately, exhausted. Within minutes, they were asleep, their sides rising and falling. Daniel sat with his back against the wall, watching them. His heart was pounding. He had hidden himself and two dangerous predators from security, from the academy, from everyone. If anyone found them, he would be in massive trouble. They might even send him back to Earth. But looking at the sleeping cubs, Daniel couldn't make himself regret it. They had needed help, and no one else had stopped to give it. Outside, the mother's roars grew louder. Hours passed in the small storage room. Daniel dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every sound. The cubs slept deeply, occasionally twitching in their dreams. The injured one had stopped limping, which was a good sign. Daniel checked the bandage twice to make sure it was holding. Around what he guessed was evening, the cubs woke up hungry. They made soft chirping sounds and pawed at Daniel's legs. He dug through the storage cabinets until he found more emergency rations. The packaging said they were nutritionally balanced for carnivorous species. He hoped that was close enough. The cubs ate eagerly, their small, sharp teeth making quick work of the dense food bars. When they finished, they looked at Daniel expectantly. He laughed despite their situation. Sorry, that's all for now. We need to make it last. One of the cubs, the uninjured one, bumped its head against Daniel's hand. He scratched behind its ears, and it made a rumbling sound deep in its chest. Almost like a purr. The other cub wanted attention too, pushing its way under Daniel's other hand. You guys need names, Daniel said softly. Can't just keep thinking of you as the cubs. He looked at them carefully. The injured one had brighter silver markings on its face. You can be Kira, he said, touching its head. The other had darker coloring overall. And you're Lex. The cubs didn't care what he called them. They just wanted more scratches. Through the walls, Daniel heard boots running past. Security teams were still sweeping the sector. He heard Vorn's voice giving orders, but couldn't make out the words. The cubs' ears pricked up at the sounds, and they pressed closer to Daniel. It's okay, he whispered. I won't let them take you. But what was his plan? He couldn't hide here forever. Eventually, someone would find them. And what about the mother? She was still out there, still searching. Daniel had heard her roars 3 more times, each one sounding more desperate. The cubs were her children. She had probably been captured while trying to protect them, taken from her home world, locked in a cage, separated from everything she knew. And now her babies were missing. Daniel couldn't imagine the fear and rage she must be feeling. We need to find her, he told the cubs. We need to get you back to your mom. Kira tilted her head, and Daniel could swear she understood. Maybe not the words, but the intent behind them. The next few hours were tense. Daniel listened at the door, trying to figure out when the corridors were clear. The cubs napped on and off, conserving energy. Around midnight, by Daniel's estimate, things finally got quiet. No more running boots. No more shouted orders. He cracked the door open and peered out. The emergency lights were still on, bathing everything in red. The corridor was empty. Come on, Daniel whispered to the cubs. Stay close. They followed him out, moving on silent paws. Daniel was surprised at how quietly they could move when they wanted to. He led them through the research sector, trying to remember the station layout from his student orientation. The ventilation system ran through the whole station. If the mother was using it to move around unseen, maybe he could use it to find her. Daniel found an access panel and pried it open. Cold air rushed out, carrying strange scents. The cubs immediately got excited, their noses working. They smelled something. Is it her? Daniel asked. Can you smell your mom? Lex pushed past him and jumped into the ventilation shaft. Kira followed immediately. Daniel had no choice but to climb in after them. The metal shaft was cramped and cold. He had to crawl on his hands and knees, following the cubs as they navigated the maze of passages. They climbed up, then across, then down. Daniel lost all sense of direction. His knees hurt from the metal and his shoulders ached from staying hunched over. but the cubs knew where they were going. They moved with purpose now, occasionally stopping to sniff the air. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, the cubs stopped at a junction where 3 shafts met. They made excited chirping sounds, their tails swishing back and forth. Daniel heard it then. Breathing, heavy and slow, coming from the left shaft. Something big was in there, and it was close. The cubs didn't hesitate. They scrambled forward, disappearing into the darkness. Daniel's heart raced. This was it. The mother was right there. He crawled forward slowly, giving his eyes time to adjust. The shaft opened into a larger maintenance space, some kind of air circulation hub. And there, lying in the center surrounded by torn metal and sparking wires, was the mother Ravenclaw. She was massive. The hologram in class hadn't done her justice. 8 powerful limbs, muscles rippling under dark fur, teeth that looked like they could bite through steel. She was covered in wounds, bleeding from several places where she had forced her way through barriers. The cubs ran to her, making happy sounds. She immediately began licking them, checking them over, making deep rumbling noises in her chest. It was such a motherly gesture that Daniel felt tears sting his eyes. Then she noticed him. Her head snapped up and those intelligent eyes locked onto Daniel. He froze, his whole body going rigid with primal fear. This was a predator, a real one, and he was trapped in a small space with no way out. The mother rose to her feet, placing herself between Daniel and the cubs. A low growl rumbled from her throat. The cubs chirped at her, pushing against her legs, but she didn't take her eyes off Daniel. "I didn't hurt them," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "I helped them. The injured one, Kira, I cleaned her cut. I fed them. I kept them safe." The mother took a step forward. Then another. She was close enough now that Daniel could smell her, a wild smell like thunderstorms and deep forests. "Please," Daniel whispered. "I know you don't understand me, but I promise I'm not a threat. I just wanted to help." The mother's nose touched his face, sniffing carefully. Daniel stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. This was how he died, probably. Killed by an alien predator in a ventilation shaft. At least his family would never know the stupid details. But the killing blow didn't come. Instead, the mother made a different sound. Softer, almost questioning. She sniffed him again, more thoroughly this time. His hands, his clothes, his hair. The cubs pressed against Daniel from behind, rubbing their faces on his back. The mother could smell them on him. Could smell that he had been close to them for hours, that they trusted him. Slowly, carefully, the mother backed up a step. The growling stopped. She looked at her cubs, then at Daniel, then back at her cubs. Something shifted in her expression. Daniel couldn't read alien facial features well, but he thought maybe it was understanding. "They're good cubs," Daniel said softly. "You raised them well." The mother settled back down, and the cubs immediately piled on top of her. But she kept watching Daniel, those sharp eyes never leaving him. After a long moment, she made a low sound. Not aggressive. Almost like an invitation. Daniel didn't know what possessed him, but he slowly crawled closer. The mother tensed but didn't growl. He sat down a few feet away, close enough to reach out and touch her if he wanted. He didn't. That seemed like pushing his luck too far. They sat in silence for a while. The cubs dozed between them, comfortable with both the human and their mother nearby. Daniel's fear slowly faded, replaced by something else. "Wonder, maybe. Or respect. We can't stay here," he finally said. "Security will find us eventually. And when they do, they'll try to put you back in that cage. Or worse." The mother's eyes narrowed at his tone. She understood danger, even if not the words. "I don't know how to fix this," Daniel admitted, "but I'm going to try. You saved them once by getting them away from wherever you came from. Now I need to save all 3 of you." He pulled out his student tablet, which somehow still had battery. The station network was locked down, but he could access basic functions. He pulled up a map of the station, studying it. "There has to be a way," he muttered. Lex woke up and crawled over to Daniel, curling up in his lap. The cub was heavy and warm. Kira joined moments later, and Daniel found himself with 2 alien predators using him as a pillow while their mother watched. In any other situation, this would be insane, but somehow in this moment it felt right. These weren't monsters. They were a family, and family protected each other. Daniel just had to figure out how to convince everyone else of that before security found them and started shooting. Daniel must have fallen asleep because he woke to the sound of boots on metal. Lots of boots moving in formation. Security teams were doing another sweep and they were getting close. The mother heard them too. Her ears went flat against her head, and a low growl started deep in her chest. The cubs stirred, sensing their mother's tension. Daniel's heart hammered as he checked his tablet. The security team was 2 corridors over and moving in their direction. "We need to move," he whispered, "but where?" The ventilation system wouldn't hide them much longer. Someone would eventually think to check the maintenance hubs. Daniel studied the map on his tablet, looking for any option that didn't end with someone getting hurt. There. An old observation lab on level 8, scheduled for renovation. It had been emptied out weeks ago and was sitting unused. If they could get there, they might have more time to figure something out. "Can you follow me?" Daniel asked the mother. She watched him with those unsettling, intelligent eyes. He pointed at the ventilation shaft that led upward. "We need to go that way." The cubs understood, scrambling up the shaft immediately. The mother looked at Daniel for a long moment, then followed her children. Daniel went last, his arms shaking with exhaustion as he pulled himself up the steep incline. They made it to the observation lab just as Daniel heard voices in the ventilation shaft behind them. He sealed the access panel and looked around frantically. The room was bare except for some old equipment covered in dust and a large window looking out at space. "We need to make this look abandoned," Daniel said, throwing sheets over the equipment in the corner. The mother watched him work, her head tilting. Then, to his surprise, she grabbed a sheet in her teeth and dragged it across the floor, helping him cover their tracks. The cubs copied their mother, pulling smaller pieces of fabric around. It would have been funny if Daniel wasn't so terrified. When they finished, Daniel found a spot behind some of the covered equipment where they could hide. The family settled in around him. The mother positioned herself where she could see the door, ready to attack anything that came through. They waited in tense silence. Daniel heard the security team pass by in the corridor outside. Heard them checking rooms. His whole body was rigid with fear. The cubs pressed against him, and he put his arms around them without thinking. The door handle turned. Daniel stopped breathing. Security Chief Vorn stepped inside, a weapon in his 3-fingered hand. 2 guards flanked him, their own weapons raised. Vorn's eyes scanned the room. They passed over the covered equipment, the empty corners, the wide window. "Clear," he said after a moment. "Nothing here." The guards lowered their weapons. One of them, a bulky alien with blue plates covering his body, shook his head. "We've checked everywhere. Maybe the creature found a way off the station." "Impossible," Vorn said. "All airlocks are sealed." "She's here somewhere." His eyes swept the room one more time. Daniel held his breath, keeping perfectly still. The cubs seemed to understand the need for silence. Even the mother didn't move a muscle. After what felt like forever, Vorn turned to leave. The guards followed him out. The door closed. Daniel let out a shaky breath. That had been too close. But they couldn't stay here. Vorn was thorough. He would come back for a more detailed search eventually. "We need help," Daniel said quietly. "Someone who might understand." He pulled out his tablet and opened his contact list. There was only one name on it. Nira. He typed out a message, keeping it vague in case security was monitoring communications. "Need to talk. Important. Meet me at Observation Lab 8C, alone. Please trust me." He hit send and waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. Daniel was starting to think she wouldn't come when his tablet buzzed. "On my way. This better be good, human." 20 minutes later, the door opened slowly. Nira slipped inside, her orange fur puffed up with nervousness. "Daniel, where are you? Why did you want to meet in this creepy empty room?" Daniel stood up from behind the equipment. "I need your help with something, but you have to promise not to freak out." Nira's ears went back. "What did you do?" "I found the cubs. The Ravenclaw cubs. They were hurt and scared, and I couldn't just leave them." "You what?" Nira's voice went high. "The security teams have been searching for those creatures. There's a shoot-on-sight order for the mother." "Where are they?" As if on cue, Kira poked her head out from behind the equipment. Nira froze, her eyes going wide. Lex appeared next, chirping at his sister. And then the mother stood up, all 400 pounds of predator rising to her full height. Nira made a sound like a kettle boiling and backed toward the door. Daniel quickly moved between her and the exit. "Wait, please," he said. "Just look at them. Really look." "That thing is a killer," Nira said, her voice shaking. "It murdered 2 guards. She was protecting her children," Daniel said. "They were stolen from their home world. She didn't ask to be locked in a cage. She just wants her baby safe. The mother watched Neera carefully but didn't attack. The cubs came over to Daniel, rubbing against his legs. Kira still had the bandage on her leg from when he had treated her cut. Neera stared. They are following you. They are acting like you are their pack. I helped them when no one else would, Daniel said. And their mother knows it, look. He slowly approached the mother, his hand extended. She sniffed his palm, then allowed him to touch her head. Daniel scratched behind her ears, and that deep rumbling purr started in her chest. This is impossible, Neera whispered. Ravenclaws cannot be tamed. Every study says so. Maybe they never tried treating them like intelligent beings instead of specimens, Daniel said. She understands more than we think, watch. He pointed at the cubs. Kira, Lex, come here. The cubs trotted over immediately. The mother watched but didn't interfere. Sit, Daniel said, using a hand gesture. The cubs looked confused. He gently pushed on their hindquarters, guiding them into sitting positions. When they did it, he gave them each a piece of his ration bar. Good. You are training them, Neera said, her voice filled with disbelief. I'm communicating with them. There's a difference. Daniel looked at his friend. Neera, we need help. Security is going to find us eventually, and when they do, they'll kill the mother and probably put the cubs back in containment. I can't let that happen. What do you want me to do? Neera asked. I am just a student. Go to Warden Tulos, tell him I want to negotiate. Tell him the Ravenclaw family is safe and calm, but only because I'm here. If security storms in with weapons, people will die. He will never agree to that. He will if the alternative is more dead guards and a destroyed station. Daniel's voice was firm. These are intelligent creatures, Neera. They deserve better than cages and experiments. Neera looked at the family. The cubs were playing now, rolling around on the floor like puppies. The mother watched them with obvious affection. It was hard to see them as monsters when they acted so much like any family. Okay, Neera finally said. I will try. But Daniel, if this goes wrong, you could be expelled. Or worse? I know. Neera left, and Daniel was alone with the Ravenclaws again. He sat down on the floor, and the cubs immediately climbed into his lap. The mother settled nearby, close enough that Daniel could feel her warmth. I hope I'm doing the right thing, he said to her. Your species and mine were both predators. Both from dangerous worlds. Maybe that's why I understand you. Or maybe I'm just an idiot human who should have stayed in his room. The mother made a soft sound, almost like a chuckle. Daniel smiled despite everything. An hour later, the door opened again. Warden Tulos entered, followed by Neera. Behind them was Security Chief Vorn and a full squad of armed guards. They all stopped dead when they saw Daniel sitting calmly with the Ravenclaw family around him. Hello, Daniel said, his voice steadier than he felt. I think we need to talk. The mother rose to her feet, positioning herself protectively. The cubs pressed against Daniel's sides. Every weapon in the room pointed at them. Nobody shoot, Tulos ordered. His skin was pure white with shock. Someone explain what I am seeing. Communication, Daniel said simply. Respect, trust. Everything that should have happened before you locked them in cages. Vorn's weapon didn't waver. That creature killed 2 of my people. She's a mother protecting her children from kidnappers, Daniel shot back. What would you do if someone stole your kids? The room went very quiet. I want them released, Daniel continued. Sent home to Thornwald where they belong. And I want better policies for how we treat intelligent species in this academy. No more prisoners for study. Tulos stared at him. You are a first-year student making demands? I'm the only thing standing between you and a bloodbath, Daniel said. She trusts me. The cubs trust me. If your people try to take them by force, she'll fight, I'll get hurt, and your guards will die. Or you can do the right thing. The mother growled, low and dangerous, as if she understood exactly what was being discussed. The cubs huddled closer to Daniel. Stand down, Tulos finally ordered. The guards lowered their weapons slowly. We will discuss this. The next 3 days changed everything at Galactic Academy Station. Daniel stayed with the Ravenclaw family in the observation lab, which had been converted into a temporary habitat. Tulos had agreed to a truce while they figured out what to do. Guards stood outside the door, but they kept their weapons holstered. Food and supplies were brought in regularly. The mother, whom Daniel had started calling Shade for her dark fur, remained calm as long as no one threatened her cubs. Scientists came and went, observing through the window. Daniel heard them arguing in the corridor about what they were seeing. It went against everything they thought they knew about Ravenclaws. Professor Halveck spent hours watching Shade interact with Daniel. His skin cycled through colors Daniel had never seen before, which apparently meant intense curiosity. On the third day, he entered the lab himself, moving very slowly with his forearms spread to show he held nothing. Shade tensed immediately. The cubs hid behind Daniel, peeking out at the professor. Daniel stood up, positioning himself between Halveck and the family. "I mean no harm," Halveck said quietly. "I just want to understand." "Understand what?" Daniel asked. "How you did this. How you formed a bond with a species that has resisted every attempt at peaceful contact." Halveck moved closer, his eyes on Shade. "We have tried for decades, offering food, using calming sounds, everything we could think of. They always attacked. Did you ever try treating them like people instead of animals?" Daniel asked. Halveck's skin flickered. "They are animals." "No," Daniel said firmly. "They're intelligent beings from a world we don't understand. You never gave them a choice. You just locked them up and expected them to cooperate." Shade made a sound, drawing their attention. She was looking at Halveck with what Daniel had learned was her thinking expression. Slowly, deliberately, she picked up one of the cub's toys, a ball Daniel had made from wadded cloth. She carried it to Halveck and dropped it at his feet. The professor stared. "She is initiating interaction. She's showing you she can communicate," Daniel said. "Pick it up gently." Halveck bent down with one hand and picked up the ball. Shade watched him carefully. He tossed it lightly and Shade caught it in her mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Shade brought the ball back and dropped it again. "She wants to play," Halveck whispered. "A fully grown Ravenclaw wants to play." "She wants to show you she's not a monster," Daniel corrected. "If you'll listen." Over the next hour, Halveck slowly gained Shade's trust. Not as much as Daniel had, but enough that she allowed him to sit in the room without attacking. The cubs even came out to sniff him, though they stayed close to their mother. When Halveck left, his skin was bright with excitement. "This changes everything we know," he said to Daniel. "I need to write reports, contact other researchers. The implications are enormous." "The implication is that we've been treating intelligent species like lab rats," Daniel said. "That's the only implication that matters." More visitors came. Some were scientists like Halveck, amazed by what they saw. Others were administrators worried about legal issues and regulations. A few were just curious students who had heard the rumors. Nira visited every day. She brought Daniel homework so he wouldn't fall behind in classes. On the fourth day, she brought something else. A datapad with messages from across the galaxy. "People have heard about what happened," she said. "About the human student and the Ravenclaw family. Some are angry. Some think you are a hero, but everyone is talking about it." Daniel scrolled through the messages. Some called him an idiot. Some called him brave. One message was from the Thornwald planetary government, demanding the return of their citizens who had been kidnapped 6 months ago. "Citizens," Daniel read aloud. "Not specimens, not animals, citizens." Nira's ears drooped. "We took them illegally. The Academy acquired them from smugglers without checking where they came from. It is a huge scandal. That explained so much. Shade hadn't just been defending her cubs from researchers. She had been trying to escape captivity, to get home to her world where she belonged." On the 5th day, Warden Tulos called a meeting in the observation lab. He brought Security Chief Vorn, Professor Halveck, and several other officials Daniel didn't recognize. They stood in a semicircle while Daniel sat with the Ravenclaw family. "We have made a decision," Tulos said. His skin was gray with stress. "The family will be returned to Thornwald. A transport ship is being prepared. They will leave in 3 days." Relief flooded through Daniel. "Thank you." "However," Tulos continued, "there are conditions. You, Daniel Reed, will accompany them to ensure safe transport. You are the only one the mother fully trusts. Once they are home, you will return to complete your studies here." Daniel nodded. He could do that. "Additionally," Tulos said, "the Academy is implementing new policies regarding the treatment of intelligent species. No more containment for study purposes. No more acquisitions from smugglers. Professor Halveck has been appointed to lead a committee that will review all our current research programs." Halveck's skin glowed with pride. "We will do better. Learn better." "What about the guards who died?" Vorn asked quietly. "Does the creature face any punishment?" Everyone looked at Shade. She stared back calmly, unafraid. She was defending her cubs from kidnappers, Daniel said. If someone broke into your home and tried to take your children, wouldn't you fight back? She did what any parent would do. Bourne was quiet for a long moment. Then he lowered his head. I understand. But my people still died. I know, Daniel said softly. I'm sorry for your loss, but more killing won't bring them back. The meeting ended. Word spread quickly through the station. The Ravenclaws were going home, and the human who had protected them was a hero. Daniel didn't feel like a hero. He just felt tired. On the 6th day, students started coming by the observation window to see the family. Daniel gave them permission to visit in small groups. Shade tolerated it, understanding somehow that these soft aliens were no threat. The cubs enjoyed the attention, showing off for their audience. One student, a small blue alien with tentacles, asked if he could touch one of the cubs. Daniel checked with Shade first, making sure she was okay with it. She watched carefully as the student gently stroked Kira's fur. The cub purred and leaned into the touch. They are soft, the student said with wonder. I thought they would feel dangerous. Dangerous and soft aren't opposites, Daniel said. Shade could kill everyone in this room if she wanted to, but she chooses not to. That's what makes her special. Nira stayed late that night after the other students left. She sat with Daniel while the cubs slept piled on top of each other. Shade dozed nearby, one eye open to watch them. You did a good thing, Nira said. A scary thing, but good. I just couldn't leave them, Daniel said. They were so scared. And Shade was just trying to protect them. It seemed wrong to let security shoot her for being a mom. Most people would have hidden and stayed safe, Nira said. You ran toward danger instead. That is very human of you, Daniel laughed. Is that a compliment? Yes, Nira said seriously. I was wrong about humans. About you. You are not just predators from a death world. You are also protectors. You see things that need help and you help them. Even when it is dangerous. That is a good quality. Thanks, Daniel said, feeling his face get warm. I think we should be friends, Nira said. Real friends, not just classmates who nod at each other. I'd like that. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Through the window, Daniel could see stars wheeling slowly past as the station rotated. Somewhere out there was Thornwald, and soon Shade and her cubs would be home. On the 7th day, the transport ship arrived. It was a small vessel designed for biological cargo, with a large containment area that had been modified to be comfortable rather than restrictive. Soft floors, climate control, plenty of space to move around. Daniel walked through the station with the Ravenclaw family following him. Students lined the corridors, watching in silence. Some looked scared. Some looked amazed. All of them watched as a human led 3 apex predators through their home like it was the most natural thing in the world. At the docking bay, a crowd had gathered. Warden Tulos was there, along with Professor Halvek and most of the faculty. Security guards lined the walls, but their weapons were holstered. Nira stood at the front of the student section, waving at Daniel. This is it, Daniel said to Shade. Time to go home. Shade looked at him with those intelligent eyes. Then she did something unexpected. She lowered her head and gently bumped it against Daniel's chest. It was a gesture of affection, of gratitude. The cubs copied their mother, both of them pressing against Daniel's legs. I'll miss you too, Daniel said, his voice thick. He had known them for less than a week, but it felt like longer. They had trusted him when no one else would. That meant something. The family boarded the transport. Daniel followed, settling into his assigned seat near the cargo area where they would be. The cubs explored the ship excitedly. Shade checked every corner, making sure it was safe. As the ship prepared to launch, Daniel looked out the window at the station, at all the faces watching them leave. A week ago, he had been the lonely human that everyone avoided. Now he was the human who had changed everything. The engines fired and they pulled away from the station, heading for a forest world where a family could finally be free. The journey to Thornwald took 6 days. Daniel spent most of that time with the Ravenclaw family in the cargo area, which was more like a mobile habitat than a cage. The ship's captain, a friendly alien with green scales and too many fingers, brought meals 3 times a day and checked that everyone was comfortable. Daniel used the time to learn more about how Shade communicated. She had a whole range of sounds that meant different things. Short chirps meant attention or alertness. Low rumbles meant contentment. Sharp barks meant danger or displeasure. The cubs were still learning their own vocal range. often making sounds that seemed random until Shade corrected them with gentle nips. By the third day, Daniel had worked out a basic system of communication using hand signals combined with Shade's natural sounds. Point at food and make a questioning noise. She would nod or shake her head. Point at the cubs and pat his lap. They would come over for attention. It wasn't language exactly, but it was understanding. "You are a natural xenolinguist," the captain told him when he explained what he was doing. "Most beings never think to learn how other species talk. They just assume everyone should speak their language." "Seems rude," Daniel said. "She's intelligent. She deserves to be heard." On the fifth day, the ship's computer alerted them that Thornwald was visible. Daniel pressed his face to the window and stared at the planet below. It was mostly green, with vast forests covering the continents. White clouds swirled across blue oceans. It looked a bit like Earth, actually. Beautiful and alive. Shade came to stand beside him, looking out at her home world. She made a sound Daniel had never heard before, something between a howl and a song. The cubs joined in, their smaller voices harmonizing with their mothers. It gave Daniel goosebumps. "You missed it," he said quietly. "I'm glad you're going back." The ship landed in a clearing designated by the Thornwald government. A delegation was waiting, several Ravenclaws larger even than Shade, along with some smaller ones that might have been older cubs. They wore simple harnesses with communication devices attached. One of them, a male with scars across his face and silver fur touched with gray, stepped forward as the ship's door opened. He spoke into his device, and it translated his words into something Daniel's tablet could understand. "We are grateful for the return of our people. The one called Shade and her cubs were taken from us many months ago. We thought them dead. They're alive," Daniel said through his own tablet's translator, "and they're ready to come home." He walked down the ramp and the Ravenclaw family followed. The moment Shade's paws touched the grass of her home world, she stopped and just stood there. The cubs tumbled past her, rolling in the grass and making excited sounds. Shade tilted her head back and made that howling song again, louder this time. The waiting Ravenclaws answered her call. Their voices rose together in a chorus that echoed across the clearing. It was celebration, Daniel realized. Pure joy at having their family back. The scarred male approached Shade carefully. They touched noses, then foreheads, making soft sounds to each other. The cubs ran to the other Ravenclaws, who greeted them with gentle nips and licks. This was their pack, their community. The family they had been stolen from. Daniel felt like an intruder on this reunion. He stepped back, giving them space. But Shade turned and looked at him. She left her pack and came back to where Daniel stood. The cubs followed their mother. Shade pressed her head against Daniel's chest again, that gesture of affection she had given him once before. The cubs rubbed against his legs, purring. Daniel put his arms around them, feeling his eyes burn with tears. "I'm going to miss you," he said. "Take care of each other, okay?" The scarred male approached with his translator active. "What did you do to earn such trust from Shade? She was always fierce, even among our own kind. Yet she treats you as pack." "I helped her cubs when they were scared," Daniel said. "And I treated her with respect." "That's all?" "That is not all," the male said. His eyes, so similar to Shade's, studied Daniel carefully. "You risked your safety for strangers from another world. That is the mark of a strong soul. We will remember the human named Daniel Reed." He touched his translator, adjusting something. "This is keyed to Shade's signature. If you ever need to contact her, use this frequency. She wishes to maintain connection with you." Daniel took the small device the male offered. "Really? She wants to stay in touch?" "Bonds formed in hardship do not break easily," the male said. "You are part of her pack now, even if you walk on 2 legs instead of 8. The goodbye took longer than Daniel expected. The cubs kept running back to him for more scratches. Shade stood close, as if reluctant to let him leave. Finally, the ship's captain gently told Daniel they needed to depart before dark. Daniel gave each cub one final hug. He touched Shade's face, and she closed her eyes, leaning into his hand. "Be happy," he told her. "Be free." He walked back to the ship, forcing himself not to look back. If he looked back, he might not be able to leave. As the ship lifted off, Daniel finally allowed himself to watch through the window. The Ravenclaws were moving toward the forest, Shade and her cubs surrounded by their pack. Before they disappeared into the trees, Shade turned and looked up at the ship. Daniel raised his hand in farewell. The journey back to the academy was lonely. Daniel had gotten used to the cubs sleeping on him at night and Shade's comforting presence. The cargo area felt too empty, too quiet, but he had done the right thing. They were home now, where they belonged. When the ship docked at the academy 3 days later, Daniel expected a quiet return. Instead, the docking bay was filled with students. They burst into applause when he stepped off the ship. Daniel stood there, confused and embarrassed, as hundreds of aliens cheered for him. Nira pushed through the crowd and grabbed his arm. "You are famous now. Everyone has been talking about you. They are calling you the Bridge Builder." "That's a weird nickname," Daniel said. "It is a good nickname," Nira corrected. "You built a bridge between species that everyone thought could never connect. You showed us that understanding is possible if we try." Warden Tulos approached, his skin cycling through colors that Daniel had learned meant approval. "Welcome back, Daniel Reed. Your actions have brought significant attention to this academy. The Galactic Council has expressed interest in your methods. They wish to study how you formed bonds with a species previously thought impossible to communicate with." "I just treated them like people," Daniel said for what felt like the 100th time. "That's all?" "That is precisely what makes it remarkable," Tulos said. "Most beings forget that simple truth. You remembered it." Classes resumed, but everything was different now. Students who had avoided Daniel before now sought him out. They asked questions about Shade and the cubs, about Thornwald, about how he had stayed calm in such a dangerous situation. Daniel answered as best he could, though he still didn't feel like a hero. Professor Halvek asked Daniel to guest lecture in his xenobiology class. Daniel stood in front of a room full of students and talked about his week with the Ravenclaw family. He showed them videos he had taken on his tablet. Shade playing with her cubs, the cubs learning to respond to simple signals. The moment when Shade had trusted him enough to let him scratch behind her ears. "The most important thing I learned," Daniel told the class, "is that intelligence comes in many forms. Shade couldn't speak my language, but she understood complex ideas. She knew I had helped her cubs. She chose to trust me based on my actions, not my words. That's sophisticated thinking. We need to remember that when we study other species." A student raised one of her 3 hands. "But how did you know she would not kill you?" "I didn't," Daniel admitted. "I was terrified. But I thought about what I would want if I was in her situation. I would want someone to help my family. So that's what I did." After the lecture, several students thanked him. One, a small alien with big eyes and soft fur, asked if Daniel would help him with a research project about interspecies communication. Daniel agreed. Weeks passed. Daniel settled into a new routine. He studied hard, made friends with more students, and helped Professor Halvek reform the Academy's research policies. No more cages, no more treating intelligent beings like objects. Every species deserved dignity and choice. 3 months after returning from Thornwald, Daniel received a message on the communication device the scarred Ravenclaw had given him. It was a simple signal, a pattern of sounds that the device translated as peaceful status. Shade was doing well. The cubs were growing strong. They were happy. Daniel sent back his own message, just a simple greeting. Minutes later, he received a response. The sounds of the forest, wind through trees, and in the background, Shade's distinctive call. She remembered him. He got similar messages every few weeks after that. Small updates on life on Thornwald. Sometimes he would hear the cubs in the background, their voices deeper as they matured. Once he received a message that was just purring, and he knew Shade had sent it specifically to let him know she was content. By the end of his first year at the academy, Daniel wasn't the scary human anymore. He was Daniel, the student who could communicate with anyone. His dorm room became a gathering place for students from dozens of worlds. They would sit together, sharing food from their home planets and talking about their differences and similarities. Nira was there most often, along with several other friends Daniel had made. One evening, as they sat together watching ships come and go from the docking bay, Nira asked him a question. "Do you think what happened with Shade will change things? Really change them?" Daniel thought about it. "I don't know about the whole galaxy, but it changed things here. It changed me. I used to think being human meant being the outsider, the dangerous one. Now I know being human means building bridges, finding connections. That's our real strength." "You make it sound easy," Nira said. "It's not easy," Daniel admitted, "but it's worth doing." Another year passed. Daniel excelled in his studies, particularly in xenobiology and interspecies relations. Professor Halvek often used Daniel as a teaching assistant, helping other students understand that intelligence and communication came in many forms. The Academy received requests from other institutions to share Daniel's methods. He wrote papers about his experience with shade, focusing on the importance of respect and patience when dealing with unknown species. His work was translated into hundreds of languages and shared across the galaxy. But Daniel's favorite moments were still the simple ones: getting messages from Thornwald, sitting with friends from different worlds, teaching a student how to understand the body language of a species they found frightening. In his third year, Daniel was asked to give a speech at the Academy's annual gathering. He stood before thousands of students and faculty, including several human students who had enrolled after hearing about his experiences. 3 years ago, I came to this academy terrified and alone, Daniel said. I was the only human here and everyone saw me as a threat. I'm not going to lie and say it didn't hurt, it did. But it also taught me something important. He paused, looking out at all the different faces watching him. Fear is natural when we encounter something we don't understand. But fear doesn't have to lead to hatred or violence. It can lead to curiosity, to learning, to connection. When I found Shade and her cubs, I could have run away. I was scared enough to, but I chose to help instead. And that choice changed everything. We're all here at this academy from different worlds with different bodies and different ways of thinking. That's not a weakness. That's our strength. Every one of us has something unique to offer. Every one of us can be a bridge between our people and others. All we have to do is choose to try. The applause was deafening. Daniel stepped down from the podium, his heart racing. But he felt good. Proud of what he had accomplished, proud of who he had become. That night, he received a message from Thornwald. Shade's signal followed by a new sound, higher-pitched, younger. The cubs had cubs of their own now. A new generation of Ravenclaws, growing up free on their home world. Daniel smiled and sent back his own signal. A simple message of joy and friendship that crossed the distance between worlds. Somewhere in the forests of Thornwald, a dark-furred Ravenclaw raised her head and listened to the sound from the stars. She remembered the small two-legged being who had saved her cubs, who had shown her that kindness existed even among strangers. She called back, her voice carrying through the trees, a sound that meant family and pack and home. The bond between them remained strong, proof that understanding could bridge any distance, any difference. A human and a Ravenclaw, friends across the stars, showing the galaxy that connection was always possible if you were brave enough to try.